Welcome. We are the People's Zoom Readers Theater, a diverse group that is committed to combating prejudice and injustice through drama. Thus, we welcome this wonderful opportunity to join the global citizen Greater Philadelphia Martin Luther King Day of Service. Today, we're going to perform from our play, Better to Light a Single Candle Than to Curse the Darkness. We're going to perform the special section that focuses on the inequities and incalculable harm of racism. We believe, like all of you here today, that Martin Luther King, the father of the civil rights movement, deserves to be celebrated because through his activism, he opened the eyes and minds of people around the world to the tragic fact that Black people in America have been deprived of the rights and respect that should have been theirs since the birth of America. We hope you will join us for our performance and follow-up discussion.
I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. I'd like to hold it in my arms and keep it company. Like to see the world for once all standing hand in hand and hear them echo through the hills for peace throughout the land.
We are voices of diversity, characters from plays and movies, writers and activists that tell stories of intolerance and discrimination.
We vary in our culture, race, religion, gender, age, sexual orientation, and more. Unfortunately, what we have in common are indelible experiences of pain, humiliation, disbelief, and despair. But we still have hope.
From the ignorant, unfeeling, and often unspeakable behavior that we've witnessed and endured, we've often wondered if the world has gone mad, if too many human beings have totally forgotten their humanity. Perhaps some terrible virus strips the mind of these individuals' power of reason and erodes their hearts of love and compassion, leaving behind animal masquerading as human beings. If not some terrible disease of the mind, what accounts for people destroying other human beings without conscience?
Some people aren't as obvious in their hatred or disrespect for others. We have seen men and women simply turn their backs on people of all ages and gender who are suffering from emotional, physical, or economic discrimination. They avert their eyes and close their ears to bullying, harassment, or worse. They might raise their eyebrows or even think of themselves as good people, but they do nothing when they witness, see, or hear comments, jokes, tweets, and blogs that are racially insulting, anti-Semitic, anti-Islamic, anti-Asian, anti-Hispanic, anti-gay, anti-female, or anti-disabled.
We know that no country, no group of people is completely free of sin when it comes to prejudice. It's been around since the beginning of time. Still, we have hope. We have today, and we have you.
Today, we are focusing on one type of prejudice, racism. We will share excerpts from plays, movies, speeches, and songs with the hope that through our experiences, we can open more eyes to the pervasiveness of prejudice and the incalculable harm it can do to the soul of its victims and the people around them. Change can only come when genuinely decent people refuse to contribute to the problem by their silence. Change will come when being decent and moral means finding the courage to apologize for insensitivity and speak up and speak out in ways that discourage callousness, cruelty, and discrimination.
Change will come when we choose government leaders who are genuinely committed to fighting for economic, social, sexual, racial, and religious equality. Change will definitely come when people like you commit to becoming a builder of brotherhood and sisterhood, a constructive member of the human race.
Together, we can light candles of hope and open minds to the importance of purging our community of prejudice.
Where does prejudice come from? I'm Oscar Hammerstein, and my partner Richard Rogers and I tried to answer this question in a song in our Broadway musical, South Pacific. The setting for our play is 1944 on an island in the South Pacific. The United States is at war, and as you can imagine, people of different races are very suspicious of each other. In our play, Lieutenant Joe Cable, a handsome US lieutenant from Philadelphia, is waiting for his dangerous assignment. While waiting, he meets and falls in love with a beautiful Tonkinese woman, a native of the island. When they talk about the future together, he thinks about the reaction of his family back home. And Lieutenant Joe Cable does something that is very hard to do. He begins to question, even challenge, the wisdom and the correctness of his upbringing. He questions the things he learned as a child, especially with regard to his association with people who are different. In the song, "You've Got to Be Carefully Taught," Joe desperately tries to remind himself why he should reject this lovely young Tonkinese woman who only wants to make him happy.
You've got to be taught to hate and fear. You've got to be taught from year to year. It's got to be drummed in your dear little ear. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught to be afraid of people whose eyes are oddly made, and people whose skin is a different shade. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught before it's too late, before you are 6 or 7 or 8, to hate all the people your relatives hate. You've got to be carefully taught.
Clearly, the explorers who first came to America learned the lessons of hate very well. Ignorance and fear of people who are different were certainly among the causes of their disrespect and hatred of my people. With little shame, these explorers decided that we, the indigenous people, weren't worthy the lands we inhabited. They took our lands and forcibly relocated us to reservations, parts of land to which we had no historical connection. Their special gifts were disease and addiction. I'm a Native American, and my history, the history of Native Americans, is literally a trail of tears, even before America became a country.
Ironically, while the government of the United States was trying to get rid of Native Americans, they were populating the country with another group of people for which they had no respect. My people. I'm Langston Hughes, African-American poet, novelist, activist, playwright, and columnist. And I know my history. In the early 1600s, my African ancestors were stolen from their countries and brought to America as slaves. Over time, the number grew to 11 to 15 million men, women, and children. It's unthinkable, isn't it, that so-called decent, honorable members of their community, who thought of themselves as moral, God-fearing model citizens of a democratic society, could treat fellow human beings worse than animals, as their personal property. And yet they did. Even after the Civil War was fought, and we African Americans were freed in 1865, became citizens in 1868, and were granted the right to vote in 1870, we were still treated shamelessly, particularly in the South. This message is vividly conveyed in The Great Debaters, a 2007 movie that is based on a true story about a debating team and their coach at Wiley College, located in Texas.
I'm Melvin Tolson, a professor and debating team coach at Wiley College. It's 1935, and I want to empower my Black students by helping them develop effective powers of reasoning and persuasive debating skills. With my guidance and our team's considerable talent, Wiley College became so successful competing with the top African American colleges that our team was invited to compete with white students, a groundbreaking achievement. This doesn't sound so revolutionary today, but in 1935, it was major. Because at that time, there were laws, Jim Crow segregation laws, that made it illegal for Blacks and whites to go to school together. So our first debate had to be held outside, off campus, due to these laws of segregation. And Samantha Book, our only female on the team, made a great case against segregation. Let's hear what she argued.
As long as schools are segregated, Negroes will receive an education that is both separate and unequal. By Oklahoma's own reckoning, the state is currently spending 5 times more for the education of a white child than it is spending to educate a colored child. That means better textbooks for the white child than for colored child. Oh, I say that's a shame, but my opponent says, today is not the day for whites and coloreds to go to the same college, to share the same campus, to walk in the same classroom. Well, would you kindly tell me when that day is going to come? Is it going to come tomorrow? Is it going to come next week? In 100 years? Never? No. The time for justice, the time for freedom, and the time for equality is always right now.
African Americans have had to fight to get a decent education, and in many places, as it has become well known today, the fight goes on. It was quite fortunate that Wiley College existed, but Wiley was an oasis in the middle of a war zone for African Americans. Educated or not, African Americans were forced to do things that no white person had to endure.
We couldn't eat, sleep, drink, or learn with white people. We sat in the back of the bus, went in the servant's door, and had to find our own places to eat and bathrooms to relieve ourselves.
We were often accused and convicted of crimes we never committed. So when our college was given the opportunity to debate the current national debate champions, we were thrilled. And when we won, it was a vindication, proof that with equality and quality education, we Black students were just as capable of great things as our white peers. I'm James Farmer, Jr. I was one of the debaters in that momentous debate, and the resolution was this: civil disobedience is a moral weapon in the fight for justice. And I'm happy to share my final argument with you. In Texas, they lynch Negroes. My teammates and I saw a man strung up by his neck and set on fire. We drove through a lynch mob with our faces pressed against the floorboards, and I looked at my teammates and I saw the fear in their eyes, and worse, the shame. What was this Negro's crime that he should be hung without trial in a dark forest filled with fog? Was he a thief? Was he a killer? Or just a Negro? Was he a sharecropper, a preacher? Were his children waiting up for him? And who were we to just lie there and do nothing? And no matter what he did, the mob was the criminal, but the law did nothing. Just left us wondering why. My opponent says, nothing that erodes the rule of law can be moral. But believe me, there's no rule of law in the Jim Crow South, not when Negroes are denied housing or turned away from schools and hospitals and certainly not when we are lynched. St. Augustine said, an unjust law is no law at all, which means I have a right, even a duty, to resist with violence or with civil disobedience. And you should pray I choose the latter.
Well, I did choose the latter. On December 1st, 1955, in Montgomery, Alabama, I, Rosa Parks, refused to give up my seat on a bus to a white man. I used civil disobedience to try to change the law of racial segregation. Well, I was arrested. And for almost 1 year, our African American brothers and sisters boycotted the buses. Now, on November 23rd, 1956, the United States Supreme Court declared segregated busing unconstitutional. And Dr. Martin Luther King, who mobilized many protests, also agreed with St. Augustine that an unjust law is no law at all. He found different ways to use civil disobedience to help African Americans improve our situations in America. But of course, the greatest memory I have of Dr. King was his nonviolent march on Washington on August 28, 1963. I believe that on that day, he earned the title Father of the Civil Rights Movement. Despite the intense heat, we were all invigorated by his words, his vision of a better future. Yes, Martin's I Have a Dream speech is forever recorded in my memory.
I say to you today, my friends, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Oh yes, I have a dream today.
Dreams. I know about dreams. I know the frustration that can result from unfulfilled dreams, the feeling of hopelessness. It can destroy you. My poem, Dreams Deferred, speaks of such frustration. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode?
That poem is about me. I'm Walter Younger, the son in A Raisin in the Sun, Lorraine Hansberry's play about an African-American family. I'm very angry and frustrated.
Walter, what is the matter with you? Seems like you're tied up in some kind of knot about something. What's the matter? What's bothering you?
Mama, there's no point in talking to you.
I'm sorry about your liquor store, son. It just wasn't the thing for us to do. That's what I want to tell you about.
Do you know what this money means to me? Do you know what this money can do for us? Mama, I want so many things.
Yes, son.
I want so many things that they are driving me kind of crazy. Mama, look at me.
I'm looking at you. You're a good looking boy. You got a job, a nice wife, a fine boy,
A
and
job? Mama, a job? I open and close car doors all day long. I drive a man around in his limousine and I say, yes, sir. No, sir. Very good, sir. Shall I take the drive, sir? That ain't no kind of job. That ain't nothing at all. Mama, I don't know if I understand.
understand what, baby?
Sometimes it's like I can see the future. Days, a big looming blank space full of nothing just waiting for me. But it don't have to be. Mama, sometimes when I'm downtown and I pass those cool, quiet looking restaurants where those white boys are sitting back and talking about things and turning deals worth millions of dollars, sometimes I see guys that don't look much older than me.
Son, how come you talk so much about money?
Because it's life, Mama.
Oh, so now it's life. Money is life. Once upon a time, freedom used to be life. Now it's money. I guess the world really has changed.
No, it was always money, Mama. We just didn't know about it. My mama didn't think my business, my liquor business, was the right thing for our family, so she didn't give me the money. Instead, she used my father's insurance money to buy a house in a nice, decent neighborhood so that my son could get a good education and all of us would have a chance at a better life.
Walter, the problem with your mother's decision is it's not just that simple. I'm Mr. Linder from the Clybourne Park Homeowners Association. I heard what you said, but you've got to admit that a man, right or wrong, has the right to have their neighborhood a certain kind of way. And we think it is better for the life of the community when everyone shares a common background. I assure you, race prejudice does not enter into it. It's a matter of the people of Clybourne Park believing, rightly or wrongly, as I say, that for the happiness of all concerned, that our Negro families are happier when they live in their own communities. We're prepared to make your family a very generous offer. Through the collective efforts of our people, we will buy the house from you at a financial gain to your family.
I'm Denzel Washington. You probably know me as a movie actor, but I love the theater too. And in 2014, I returned to Broadway to play the character of Walter Younger. You might think I'm a little too old to play Walter. Now don't laugh. I know what you are thinking. Truth is, I am a lot older, but Walter is a character I was dying to play for a long time because Walter speaks for so many Black men, people I grew up with, people who lived a life of frustration and rejection. Oh yes, rejection. Man, to listen to Mr. Linder tell Walter and his family that they aren't welcome to move into Clybourne Park because of the color of their skin, well, that is really hard. But it's the way a lot of people think. It's racism, residential racism. It sure hurts to know that people would rather pay you off than have you move into their neighborhood. Things have changed somewhat. There are some mixed neighborhoods today, but racism is still a very serious problem in the United States, and it affects every aspect of a person's life, economically, educationally, socially, and politically. Walter was right when he talked about money. Too often it is money that segregates people. People who don't have a decent paying job can't afford to live in a decent neighborhood where their children can attend first-rate schools, schools that have the latest textbooks and technology, and schools that have the best teachers. If your children can't get the knowledge and skills necessary to get into college, they aren't going to get in, and they aren't going to get decent paying jobs. That's just the way it is. They are stuck in the same economic situation as their parents.
Children who can't see a way out of their dead-end situation feel hopeless. What's the motivation to work hard and live according to the rules of our society? Where are the rewards for good behavior? Without hope, it should be no surprise that people escape in the bottle or take drugs and often get into trouble because they need money to pay for their bad habits. It's difficult for us, African Americans, to break this cycle of poverty and hopelessness. Even the ones who do break the cycle of poverty today face another kind of racism that is creating tremendous fear and despair throughout African American community. Ta-Nehisi Coates, writer and educator and national correspondent for The Atlantic, wrote in his book, Between the World and Me, that Black lives are still in serious jeopardy. His book won the 2015 National Book Award for nonfiction.
I wrote my book as a letter to my teenage son, who may have felt safe and secure because of the life I was fortunate to provide for him. But after seeing so many innocent young Black men victims of police brutality, I felt I needed to tell him that each time a police officer engages us, death, injury, and maiming is possible. White supremacy is still alive and well. Today, there is a sprawling prison system which has turned the warehouse of Black bodies into a jobs program for the white people, with 8% of the world's prisoners being Black. Yes, Black life is cheap, but in America, Black bodies are a natural resource of incomparable value.
My son was of incomparable value to me and our family when he was alive. A smart young man, just about to graduate from Howard University, and he is killed. What did he do to deserve this? Nothing. It was racial profiling, racism. There was a trigger-happy police officer who killed my son while he was sitting in his car. When they told me at the hospital that he was gone, it was like anything I had ever felt before. It was physically painful. Whenever a thought of him would come to mind, all I could do was pray and ask for mercy. I thought I was going to lose my mind and go crazy. I felt sick. I felt like I was dying.
Felt I was dying when my son Walter Scott was killed in April 2015.
And when my son, Tenoris Williams, was killed in November 2015.
And my son, Trayvon Martin, in 2012.
And my son, Michael Brown.
And my son, Jordan Davis.
And my son, John Crawford III.
And my son, Tamir Rice.
And
my son, Eric Harris.
And my son, Jonathan Farrell.
And my daughter, Sandra Bland.
And my daughter, Bronna Taylor.
How long will it take for America to understand that Black lives matter?
Black lives matter.
Black lives matter.
Black lives matter.
All the days, weeks, months, seasons, and years that I cared for my child, all the dreams of a better life for my children, and one racist act, and it's all over. That's all it takes. One bullet. It's all over.
With the horrific death of my son, George Floyd, and the protests that followed, perhaps this time will be different. It's got to change.
What happens to a dream deferred? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or maybe it explodes.
Today, we are living in what many people call a perfect storm. The pandemic has negatively impacted all of our lives, physically, emotionally, socially, financially, and academically. A lot of people are angry, worried, and desperate. To make matters worse, we have witnessed too many acts of hatred and violence. People of all races and religions are challenged today, some more than others. We need wise, knowledgeable, and compassionate leadership who concretely address problems that have been festering for years. We certainly hope that systemic racism will be exposed and eradicated on every level.
We also hope that people of all kinds will make a special effort to reject acts of prejudice and treat each other with respect and kindness, and help each other whenever possible.
With your help, we believe that we can work together to build a more harmonious and accepting world that we can all be proud to inhabit.
It's never too late to do something right.
We hope that from this moment on, you will add your voice to our message and be a builder of a better human race too.
So although we can't sing together, we do invite you, if you can, to sing in your own homes, to know that we are all here to rise. We rise, humbly hearted.
Rise, won't be divided.
Rise, with spirit to guide us. Rise.
In hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here. In hope, in prayer, we are here.
Oh, in hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here. In hope, in prayer, we're right here.
We rise, all of the children.
Rise, elders with wisdom.
Rise, ancestors surround us. Rise.
In hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here. In hope, in prayer, we're right here.
In hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here. In hope, in prayer, we are here.
We rise up from the wreckage.
Rise with tears and with courage.
Rise, fighting for life.
Rise, humbly hearted.
Rise, won't be divided.
Rise, spirit to guide us. Rise.
We rise.
Now we welcome members of our audience to share your personal stories. You can also tell us about the changes you would like to see that will improve lives in your community and beyond.